What if I told you that the most powerful force in the universe isn't hidden in some distant galaxy, locked away in ancient temples, or reserved for a chosen few, but is actually dormant right inside you, waiting to be awakened? But before we begin, please hit the like button and let me know where in the world you're watching from today. It's always fascinating seeing who's joining us from around the world. Think about this for a moment. Every single day, you wake up carrying within your consciousness the same creative power that formed galaxies, that breathes life into every living thing, that orchestrates the perfect symphony of existence itself. Yet most of us go through life completely unaware of this extraordinary truth, settling for mediocrity when we were designed for magnificence. The ancient psalmist declared something so radical, so revolutionary, that it still shakes the foundations of how we see ourselves today. You are gods, not metaphorically, not symbolically, but as a fundamental reality of your very existence. Has this ever happened to you? You've felt that spark, that inner knowing that you're capable of so much more than what your current circumstances suggest. Here's what most people don't realize. Every human being, regardless of their background, education, or current situation, is an individual expression of the infinite principle. This isn't wishful thinking or New Age fantasy. This is the core truth that all of Scripture revolves around. God can only create according to his own nature, which means every person walking this earth is literally a container of divine potential, carrying within them the seed of omnipotence. But here's where it gets fascinating, and what you're about to discover might surprise you. This power isn't some abstract concept floating around in spiritual clouds. It's practical, it's immediate, and it's operating through your thoughts, your words, and your consciousness right now, whether you're aware of it or not. The question isn't whether you possess this unlimited spiritual power. The question is whether you know how to access it, direct it, and use it to transform every area of your life. Stay with me until the end, because what we're about to explore together will completely revolutionize how you understand your own capabilities. We're going to dive deep into the ancient wisdom that modern science is just beginning to validate. That your mind isn't just some biological computer processing information, but is actually the very mechanism through which divine intelligence expresses itself in the physical world. Most people spend their entire lives as spiritual millionaires living like beggars, simply because they've never been taught how to access their inheritance. They struggle with limitation, lack, and frustration, all while carrying within them the same creative force that spoke light into existence. The tragedy isn't that this power doesn't exist, it's that we've forgotten how to use it. Right now, as you're watching this, that divine spark within you is stirring, recognizing truth when it hears it. And what we're about to uncover together will show you exactly how to transform not just your circumstances, but your entire understanding of what it means to be human. And this transformation begins with recognizing something that children understand instinctively, but that we've somehow forgotten as adults. Watch any child building sandcastles on the beach. When that inevitable wave comes crashing down, washing away hours of careful construction, what happens? Do they collapse in despair? Do they give up and walk away defeated? Absolutely not. They immediately start building again, often with even more enthusiasm than before. Why? Because in their minds, the idea of the castle exists independently of its physical form. The wave might have destroyed the sand, but it couldn't touch the creative vision that lives in their imagination. If this kind of deep spiritual content speaks to your soul, I'd love to have you join our community by hitting that subscribe button. Every week I share practical wisdom that helps you unlock more of your divine potential and create real transformation in your life. This is creative consciousness in its purest form, the understanding that the invisible always precedes the visible, that thought creates reality, not the other way around. Children haven't yet been conditioned to believe that what they see with Their eyes is more real than what they can conceive in their minds. They live from the inside out, naturally demonstrating the very principle that adults spend decades trying to relearn. But here's where this gets really profound. When Genesis speaks about humans being made in God's image, it's not talking about physical appearance. The word image in this context means idea, model, blueprint. It's describing functional power, creative capacity. You weren't just made to look like God. You were made to operate like God, to create like God, to express the same divine intelligence that orchestrates the entire universe. The real revelation comes when you understand what actually happened in that ancient story we call the fall. It wasn't about perfection being lost forever. It was about attention being diverted. Humanity didn't lose its divine nature. It simply started focusing on the wrong things. Instead of seeing from the unified perspective of divine consciousness, we began viewing reality through the lens of separation, limitation, and duality. Think about the profound implications of this shift in perspective. The moment you start believing that you're separate from the source of all good, separate from infinite possibility, separate from your own divine nature, you automatically create the experience of lack, struggle, and limitation. Not because these things are real, but because your focused attention gives them the appearance of reality. This is the hidden truth behind every transformation story you've ever heard. It's not that circumstances magically change on their own. It's that when someone shifts their attention back to their true nature, back to their connection with infinite intelligence, their entire reality reorganizes itself to match that inner knowing. The most successful people in any field, whether they realize it or not, operate from this principle. They don't let external circumstances dictate their internal state. They don't wait for permission from the world to step into their power. They understand, either consciously or unconsciously, that the creative force flows from within outward, not the other way around. But here's what makes this even more fascinating. This isn't just ancient wisdom or spiritual philosophy. Modern neuroscience is discovering that our brains are literally rewiring themselves based on our dominant thoughts and beliefs. What we focus on consistently becomes our reality, not just mentally, but physically, biologically, and circumstantially. The journey back to this natural state of creative consciousness isn't about learning something new. It's about remembering something you've always known. It's about stripping away the layers of conditioning that have convinced you that you're small, limited, powerless, when the truth is exactly the opposite. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic, because there's a specific process, a precise method, that allows you to reclaim this divine, creative authority in your daily life. The ancient texts weren't just sharing philosophical concepts, they were providing practical instructions for accessing and directing this unlimited spiritual power. Write in the comments, "I remember my true nature," if this resonates with you. The first step in accessing this power involves understanding something that will completely revolutionize your relationship with your own mind. If you truly are a child of the Most High, if you genuinely carry divine intelligence within your consciousness, then your mind cannot be a dumping ground for fear, resentment, worry, or any other destructive pattern of thinking. Here's the revelation that changes everything. Every single thought you entertain is literally a seed planted in the fertile soil of your subconscious mind, and every emotion you attach to that thought becomes the rain, the sunshine, the nutrients that determine whether that seed grows into something beautiful or something destructive. In your life experience, most people go through their days completely unconscious of this process. They allow their minds to be invaded by whatever random thoughts happen to drift by. News headlines designed to trigger fear, conversations filled with complaint and limitation, internal dialogues that replay past hurts or project future worries. They're essentially planting weeds in their mental garden and then wondering why their life doesn't bloom with joy, abundance, and success. But when you understand that you have authority over your thought life, when you realize that you can choose what gets planted in your consciousness, everything shifts. You stop being a victim of random mental circumstances and start becoming the deliberate architect of your own experience. If this content helped you remember something important about your own spiritual nature, that like button is a beautiful way to let me know this message landed where it needed to. Plus, it helps other seeking souls discover these transformative ideas. This isn't about positive thinking or pretending that challenges don't exist. This is about recognizing that you have the power to respond to any situation from a place of divine wisdom rather than human reactivity. It's about understanding that your thoughts are not just passive observations of reality. They're active creative forces. That are literally shaping your tomorrow. The transformation begins the moment you elevate your self-concept, when you stop seeing yourself as a product of chance or a victim of inherited limitations. So many people carry around these invisible chains, believing that because they came from a certain background, because they have certain genetic predispositions, because they've made certain mistakes in the past, they're somehow doomed to repeat those patterns forever. But here's the hidden truth that changes everything. You are not a product of your circumstances. You are not defined by your family history. You are not limited by your past decisions or current conditions. You are a center of divine expression, a unique focal point through which infinite intelligence chooses to experience and create in this physical dimension. When you genuinely elevate your self-concept, when you start seeing yourself as the divine being that you actually are, something remarkable happens. Your outer world begins to reorganize itself to match that inner knowing. It's not magic, it's law. The universe has no choice but to reflect back to you the level of consciousness you consistently maintain. This is why some people seem to effortlessly attract opportunities, relationships, and resources, while others struggle constantly despite working just as hard. The difference isn't in their external actions, it's in their internal self-concept. One person sees themselves as worthy of good things and naturally draws those experiences. The other sees themselves as struggling and undeserving and unconsciously repels the very things they claim to want. The most successful leaders in business, the most innovative artists, the most influential change makers throughout history have all understood this principle, even if they couldn't articulate it in spiritual terms. They carried themselves with an inner authority that came from knowing who they really were at the deepest level. Your journey to unlimited spiritual power begins with this fundamental decision. Will you continue to see yourself through the lens of human limitation, or will you dare to embrace your true identity as a divine being having a human experience? Will you keep planting seeds of doubt and fear in your mental garden, or will you become intentional about cultivating thoughts that align with your highest potential? The impact of this single shift in perspective cannot be overstated. When you truly grasp that your self-concept is the template from which your entire life experience is created, you realize that transformation isn't about changing your circumstances. It's about changing how you see yourself in relationship to those circumstances. Now, there's a specific technique, a precise method that the ancient wisdom traditions used to maintain this elevated consciousness consistently, and it involves understanding the most powerful phrase in human language. Write in the comments, "I choose my thoughts," if you're ready to take responsibility for your mental garden. This powerful phrase that Moses discovered when he encountered the divine presence in that burning bush. I am that I am. But first, we need to understand something crucial about the responsibility that comes with recognizing your divine nature. Here's a revelation that most people miss entirely. When you accept the title of divine sonship, when you embrace your identity as a spiritual being, this automatically implies service. Not servitude, but service. There's a profound difference. You see, once you understand that your thoughts have creative power, you quickly realize that this power doesn't exist in isolation. Your consciousness is connected to every other consciousness on the planet through what we might call the unified mind. Every thought you think, every emotion you feel, every belief you hold doesn't just affect your personal experience. It ripples out into the collective consciousness of humanity. When you choose thoughts of fear, limitation, and separation, you're not just limiting yourself, you're contributing to the fear-based atmosphere that affects everyone around you. But when you consciously choose thoughts of love, abundance, and possibility, you're literally raising the vibrational frequency of the entire human experience. This channel is dedicated to people who are serious about spiritual growth and practical manifestation. If you're ready to continue expanding your consciousness with content like this, subscribing ensures you never miss the tools and insights that can accelerate your journey. This is why the journey of spiritual awakening always leads to service. Not because you're obligated to help others, but because you naturally begin to realize that there is no others. There's only one consciousness expressing itself through billions of different focal points. Your transformation automatically becomes a gift to the world because your elevated consciousness creates space for others to remember their own divine nature. Now, understanding this responsibility brings us to one of the most profound revelations in all of spiritual literature. When Moses approached that burning bush in the desert and asked for the name of the divine presence speaking to him, he received an answer that contains the master key to unlimited spiritual power. I am that I am. Most people read right past this phrase.
You see these police on the back, they doing raids. We was never planning for this day. Look, ain't no point of money in the safe.
Without grasping its earth-shattering implications, this wasn't just a mystical riddle or an evasive non-answer. This was the revelation of the fundamental nature of divine consciousness, pure, self-sufficient existence that doesn't depend on anything external for its reality or power. Think about what this means. When the divine declares, I am that I am, it's expressing existence that has no cause outside itself. No dependency on circumstances, no possibility of lack or limitation. It simply is, in the most complete, perfect, and unlimited sense possible. Here's where this becomes revolutionary for your personal transformation. Every time you say, I am, followed by anything, you're tapping into that same infinite creative power that spoke those words to Moses. You're not using some separate human willpower. You're connecting with the very source of existence itself. The problem is that most people use this sacred phrase unconsciously, attaching it to limitations. I am broke, I am sick, I am not good enough, I am too old, I am unlucky. Without realizing it, they're using the most powerful creative force in the universe to manifest exactly what they don't want. But when you understand what's really happening behind the scenes, when you grasp that I am is literally the name of God functioning through your consciousness, everything changes. Suddenly you realize that you have access to the same creative authority that formed galaxies and breathes life into every living thing. This isn't metaphorical or symbolic. This is the actual mechanism through which divine intelligence expresses itself in physical reality. The burning bush that Moses encountered wasn't just a historical event. It was a demonstration of how spirit manifests in matter when consciousness aligns with its true source. The journey of reclaiming your spiritual power begins with understanding that you carry this same burning bush within your own consciousness. The divine presence that spoke to Moses is the same presence that speaks through your I am declarations right now. But there's a specific way to use this power that multiplies its effectiveness exponentially, and it involves understanding the precise difference between declaration and supplication. Write in the comments, I am divine, if you're ready to claim your spiritual inheritance. When you truly understand that saying I am connects you to the same creative nucleus that burned unconsumed in Moses' desert experience, you begin to realize that this divine spark within you doesn't depend on your bank account, your health condition, your relationship status, or any external circumstance to operate at full power. It only requires two things, recognition and conscious use. But here's where most people get tripped up. And it's probably the most important distinction you'll ever learn about manifesting your desires. The power isn't activated by occasional positive thinking or weekend affirmations. It's governed by the consistent quality of your internal dialogue, that constant stream of thoughts and self-talk that runs through your mind from the moment you wake up until you fall asleep. Think about this for a moment. Your subconscious mind is like a faithful recording device that's running 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. It doesn't take vacations, it doesn't judge what you're feeding it, and it doesn't distinguish between what you say out loud and what you think silently. It simply records the dominant emotional tone of your mental conversations and then works tirelessly to create external experiences that match those internal patterns. This is why so many people struggle with manifestation, despite learning all the right techniques. They might spend Sunday morning declaring, I am prosperous, or I am healthy, with great enthusiasm, but then throughout the week, their internal dialogue tells a completely different story. The successful businessman who affirms abundance on the weekend but spends Monday through Friday mentally rehearsing, I can't handle these expenses, this economy is terrible, I'm barely keeping my head above water. The subconscious doesn't care that his Sunday affirmation was more spiritually correct. It responds to frequency and emotion, and if he's spending 20 times more mental energy focused on financial struggle than on financial abundance, guess which reality his subconscious is going to create? This is the hidden truth behind why some people seem to effortlessly attract success while others work incredibly hard but continue to struggle. It's not about their external actions or even their conscious intentions. It's about the quality and consistency of their internal mental atmosphere. Your mind is constantly engaged in this internal dialogue, and every single thought either reinforces your divine nature or reinforces limitation. There's no neutral territory. When you think, I am tired, I am overwhelmed, I am not smart enough, I am getting too old, you're using the sacred name of divine consciousness to create exactly those experiences in your life. When you hit that like button, you're not just showing appreciation. You're actually helping this message reach other people who desperately need to hear that they have unlimited spiritual power within them. Your engagement literally changes lives. But here's what's truly remarkable. The moment you become conscious of this process, the moment you start paying attention to your mental grammar, you can begin to redirect this incredible creative force. Instead of unconsciously programming limitation, you can Deliberately use your I am declarations to align with your highest potential. The transformation happens when you realize that your thoughts aren't just random mental noise. They're precise instructions to the creative force of the universe. Every time you attach something to I am, you're literally commanding reality to conform to that description. You're not hoping or wishing or pleading. You're declaring what is true from the perspective of divine consciousness. This is why the ancient wisdom traditions placed such emphasis on watchfulness, on guarding your thoughts, on being mindful of the quality of your internal dialogue. They understood that your mind is the sacred temple where creation takes place, and what you allow to dwell there determines what manifests in your external experience. Most people live their entire lives backwards, waiting for their circumstances to change so they can feel better and think more positively. But the real journey involves understanding that your external world is always a reflection of your internal world, and that lasting transformation always begins with changing the conversation you're having with yourself. The key is developing what we might call mental discipline, not in a harsh, restrictive sense, but in the sense of becoming a conscious gardener of your own consciousness, deliberately planting thoughts that will grow into the reality you actually want to experience. Write in the comments, I choose my words carefully, if you're ready to transform your internal dialogue. This brings us to one of the most misunderstood aspects of spiritual development, and it's probably where most people get stuck on their journey to accessing unlimited spiritual power. When you start declaring, I am powerful, I am abundant, I am whole and complete, there's often this internal voice that whispers, isn't this just ego? Isn't this arrogance? Who do you think you are to claim such power? But here's the revelation that dissolves that confusion completely. When you look in a mirror and see your reflection, you naturally acknowledge, that's me. You're not claiming to have created the mirror. You're not boasting about the quality of the glass or taking credit for the physics of light reflection. You're simply recognizing what the mirror reveals about your presence in that moment. Declaring your divine nature works exactly the same way. When you say, I am powerful, you're not claiming that your human personality created this power or that you're somehow superior to others. You're simply recognizing the force that dwells within you, acknowledging the divine reflection that's always been there, waiting for you to notice it. The mirror of consciousness reveals your true nature, and taking credit for that revelation would be like taking credit for the sunrise. You didn't create your divine essence any more than you created the sun, but that doesn't mean you should deny its existence or pretend. It's not illuminating your world right now. This understanding becomes crucial when you realize how most people unconsciously sabotage their own transformation through negative self-definitions. Listen to the conversations around you. Pay attention to how people introduce themselves and their circumstances. I am diabetic. I am broke. I am clumsy at math. I am always unlucky in relationships. What they don't realize is that they're literally tattooing these conditions onto the same creative mold that could receive the solution. They're using the sacred creative force to cement temporary circumstances into permanent identity. It's like having access to the most sophisticated computer in the universe and programming it to repeat error messages. Here's the distinction that changes everything. A medical diagnosis describes a temporary state that your body is currently experiencing. I am describes your permanent essence, your unchanging divine nature. When someone says, I am diabetic, they're not just reporting a physical condition. They're declaring it as their identity, making it part of their core being, instructing their subconscious to maintain and reinforce that reality. I create these in-depth explorations specifically for souls who are ready to remember their true power. By subscribing, you're not just getting notifications, you're joining a community of conscious creators who are actively transforming their lives through spiritual principles. But what if instead They understood that diabetes is something they're currently experiencing, not something they are. What if they could separate their temporary condition from their eternal identity? This isn't about denying reality or refusing medical treatment. It's about refusing to let temporary circumstances define your permanent sense of self. The impact of this shift is profound. When you stop identifying with your problems and start identifying with your divine nature, you create space for transformation. Your subconscious stops working to maintain the problem as part of your identity and starts working to restore your natural state of wholeness. Think about how this plays out in every area of life. The person who says, "I am bad with money," programs their subconscious to prove that statement true, unconsciously making decisions that reinforce financial struggle. The person who declares, "I am always attracting the wrong relationships," literally magnetizes experiences that confirm that belief. But the person who understands that they are divine consciousness, temporarily experiencing financial challenges or relationship lessons, that person creates completely different results because they're operating from a completely different foundation of identity. This is why the ancient wisdom traditions were so precise about language, so careful about how divine names and spiritual principles were expressed. They understood that words aren't just communication tools. They're creative instruments that literally shape reality according to the consciousness behind them. The journey toward unlimited spiritual power requires this fundamental decision. Will you continue to define yourself by temporary conditions and circumstances, or will you dare to identify with the eternal, unlimited divine essence that is your true nature? Now, there's a specific practice that the mystics use to maintain this elevated identity consistently, and it involves understanding the difference between the mind of limitation and what Scripture calls the mind of Christ. Write in the comments, "I am beyond my circumstances," if this distinction is becoming clear to you. When the Apostle Paul made that revolutionary declaration, "We have the mind of Christ," he wasn't describing some exclusive privilege reserved for a select few spiritual elite. He was revealing the spiritual architecture that's built into every human consciousness, a pre-established mental model of perfect perception and action that exists as your birthright, waiting to be activated through recognition and practice. This is where so many people get confused about the true nature of spiritual transformation. They think that accessing Christ consciousness means trying to copy the historical personality of Jesus, adopting his mannerisms, speaking in ancient phrases, or somehow becoming a carbon copy of his human expression. But that completely misses the profound truth that Paul was revealing. Here's the distinction that changes everything. Jesus was the historical manifestation, the perfect human demonstration of divine consciousness in action. Christ is the internal, timeless dimension, the eternal pattern of divine intelligence that exists within every human soul as a latent possibility. Jesus showed us what it looks like when someone fully embodies this consciousness, but the consciousness itself isn't limited to one historical figure. Think of it this way. When you watch a master pianist perform a breathtaking concerto, you're not witnessing something that only that one person can do. You're seeing the perfect expression of musical principles that exist independently of any individual performer. The music itself, the harmonies, the mathematical relationships between notes, the emotional resonance, these exist as eternal possibilities that any consciousness can access through proper understanding and practice. The mind of Christ operates exactly the same way. It's a pattern of consciousness characterized by unified vision that sees beyond the appearance of separation, unconditional love that recognizes the divine nature in all beings, and natural authority over form that flows from understanding the relationship between consciousness and manifestation. This pattern remains intact as a latent option in every human psyche, regardless of religious background, cultural conditioning, or current level of spiritual development. It's not something you have to earn or deserve. It's something you have to remember and activate. The transformation happens when you realize that this elevated consciousness isn't foreign to you. It's not something you need to import from outside yourself or learn from scratch. It's the natural state of your divine mind when it's not clouded by fear-based thinking, limiting beliefs, or identification with temporary circumstances. What makes this so practical and powerful is that you can begin accessing this consciousness right now in whatever situation you're currently facing. You don't need to wait until you're more spiritual, more evolved, or more worthy. The mind of Christ is available in this moment, in your current circumstances, as a way of perceiving and responding that instantly elevates your experience. That little like button below means the world to me because it tells me this content is serving its purpose of awakening divine consciousness. And every like helps the algorithm share this wisdom with someone who's searching for exactly these answers today. When challenges arise, instead of reacting from the limited human perspective that sees problems as permanent and power as external, you can choose to respond from the Christ consciousness that sees every situation as an opportunity for divine intelligence to express itself through you. This isn't about religious belief or spiritual pretense. This is about accessing a level of consciousness that naturally produces solutions, attracts resources, and creates harmony, because it operates from the unified field of divine intelligence rather than the fragmented field of ego-based thinking. The journey of spiritual development becomes much simpler when you understand that you're not trying to become something you're not. You're simply remembering and expressing what you've always been. The mind of Christ isn't a destination you're traveling toward. It's the vehicle you're traveling in once you recognize its availability. Every great leader, innovator, and change-maker throughout history has tapped into this consciousness, whether they understood it in spiritual terms or not. They accessed a level of thinking that transcended ordinary limitations and produced extraordinary results. Now, there's a specific mechanism that governs how this elevated consciousness translates into practical transformation in your daily life, and it involves understanding the precise relationship between mental law and divine law. Write in the comments, "I have access to divine consciousness," if you're beginning to sense this truth within yourself. The moment you begin to access Christ consciousness, you discover that the entire universe operates through what we might call a double mechanism, two interlocking laws that work together to create every experience in physical reality. Understanding how these laws interact gives you the master plan of creation itself, the behind-the-scenes blueprint that governs how thoughts become things and how divine intention manifests in the material world. The first part of this mechanism is what we call mental law, the precise process by which any image that you sustain in your consciousness eventually takes form in your experience. This isn't wishful thinking or New Age fantasy. This is the fundamental operating system of reality itself. Every single thing that exists in the physical world, from the device you're watching this on to the chair you're sitting in, first existed as a sustained image in someone's mind. But here's where it gets fascinating. Mental law by itself could create chaos if it operated without any governing principle. Imagine if every random thought, every fearful projection, every moment of anger or confusion immediately manifested in physical reality. The world would be complete pandemonium. That's where the second part of the mechanism comes in. Divine law is the eternal intention of the universe to express only good, harmony, beauty, love, abundance, perfect order. It's like a cosmic safety net that ensures that even when we use mental law, unconsciously or destructively, there's always an underlying current working to restore balance and bring forth the highest possible outcome from any situation. These two laws don't compete with each other. They work in perfect harmony. Mental law provides the mechanism through which consciousness creates form. Divine law provides the direction, ensuring that ultimately all creation serves the highest good. Even when it doesn't appear that way from our limited human perspective, the transformation in your life happens when you learn to consciously align mental law with divine law, when you deliberately use the creative power of your mind in service of the universal intention for good. This is what every master teacher throughout history understood. They weren't fighting against the natural order. They were cooperating with it at the deepest level. Now, mental law operates through 3 distinct phases, and understanding these phases gives you incredible precision in your ability to manifest desired outcomes. The first phase is attention, the process of focusing your mental energy on a specific point, like using a magnifying glass to concentrate sunlight. When you give sustained attention to any idea, you're literally concentrating the creative force of consciousness into that particular pattern. The second phase is acceptance. This is where you infuse that mental form with the quality of reality, where you move beyond hoping or wishing and into knowing. Acceptance is the emotional component that gives life to the mental image, like providing the heat and moisture that allows a seed to germinate. The third phase is expectation. The ability to sustain the mental matrix without wavering until the invisible mold condenses into its physical reflection. This isn't anxious waiting or desperate hoping, but rather the calm confidence of someone who has planted a garden and knows that harvest time will come. Most people unconsciously use these 3 phases to create exactly what they don't want. They give sustained attention to their problems. They accept limitation as reality through emotional investment in fear and worry, and they expect things to continue getting worse. Mental law responds just as faithfully to negative patterns as to positive ones. It's completely impartial. But when you understand how the process works, when you become conscious of these 3 phases, you can begin to deliberately direct them toward outcomes that align with divine law. You can choose to focus your attention on possibilities rather than problems. Accept abundance and wholeness as your natural state, and expect divine intelligence to orchestrate circumstances in ways that serve everyone involved. The journey of mastering unlimited spiritual power becomes a matter of learning to work with these natural laws rather than against them, understanding that you're not trying to force the universe to bend to your will, but rather aligning your will with the universe's infinite creativity. Now, the practical application of these principles requires what the ancient traditions called thought discipline, not harsh mental control, but the cultivation of consciousness that naturally attracts harmony and success. Write in the comments, "I align with universal law," if you're ready to work with these creative principles consciously. This understanding of universal law brings us to one of the most practical aspects of accessing unlimited spiritual power, and it involves treating your mind exactly like a master gardener treats their most prized garden. Just as a fertile garden will inevitably produce whatever seeds are planted in it, whether flowers or weeds, your mind will inevitably manifest whatever thoughts and images you consistently cultivate within it. The difference between someone who lives in constant struggle and someone who seems to effortlessly attract success isn't about luck, circumstances, or even external actions. It's about the quality of mental seeds they're planting day after day, and more importantly, their awareness of what's growing in the garden of their consciousness. A responsible gardener doesn't just plant good seeds and walk away hoping for the best. They return daily to remove weeds before they can take root. They water the plants they want to grow. They protect the delicate seedlings from harsh weather, and they cultivate the soil to create the most fertile environment possible. Mental hygiene works exactly the same way. Most people treat their minds like abandoned lots, where any random thought can take root and grow wild. They allow worry, fear, resentment, and limitation to spread like invasive weeds, choking out the possibilities for joy, abundance, and creative expression. Then they wonder why their lives feel chaotic, why opportunities seem scarce, why relationships are difficult. But when you understand that you are the gardener of your own consciousness, everything changes. You realize that you have both the responsibility and the power to tend this inner garden with the same care that a master gardener brings to their craft. This isn't about perfection or never having a negative thought. It's about developing the awareness to notice what's growing in your mental space and making conscious decisions about what you want to cultivate. In our modern world, this practice of mental gardening has become more challenging than ever before. We're living in an age dominated by information overload, where our minds are constantly bombarded with contradictory stimuli. News headlines designed to trigger fear and anxiety, social media feeds that promote comparison and inadequacy, conversations filled with complaint and limitation. All of these create a kind of mental pollution that makes it difficult to maintain clarity and inner peace. This is why the practice of interior silence has become absolutely essential for anyone serious about spiritual development. You must daily reserve sacred time to withdraw your attention from all external images and immerse yourself in the quietude where divine intelligence can speak to you directly. This isn't meditation in the sense of trying to empty your mind or achieve some mystical state. This is simply the practice of stepping back from the noise of the world and reconnecting with the source of wisdom, creativity, and power that exists within your own consciousness. It's like giving your mental garden a chance to rest and regenerate, free from the constant input that can overwhelm your natural clarity. The transformation that occurs through consistent interior silence practice is remarkable. When you regularly create space for this inner quietude, you begin to notice the difference between the voice of divine wisdom and the chatter of conditioned thinking. You start to receive insights, solutions, and inspirations that your busy, distracted mind could never access. Most importantly, you develop what we might call mental resilience, the ability to maintain your inner peace and clarity regardless of what's happening in the external world. Instead of being constantly reactive to circumstances, you become responsive from a place of centered awareness. This practice of cultivating interior silence isn't just beneficial for your personal well-being, it's essential for accessing the kind of consciousness that can actually transform your external circumstances. When your mind is calm and clear, when you're connected to divine intelligence, you naturally make better decisions, attract better opportunities, and respond to challenges from a place of wisdom rather than fear. Now, there's a specific technique for developing this interior silence that's been used by mystics and masters throughout history, and it forms the foundation for what we call scientific prayer. Write in the comments, "I cultivate inner peace." If you're ready to become the conscious gardener of your own mind, this foundation of interior silence naturally leads us to understand something crucial about how your mind actually operates. Most people think of their mind as some kind of neutral storage container where thoughts just come and go without consequence. But the reality is far more dynamic and powerful than that. Your mind is actually a living organism that actively digests, assimilates, and reproduces every single concept. You feed it, transforming those ideas into the feelings you experience and the facts of your daily life. Just as your physical body converts food into energy, cells, and bodily functions, your mind converts thoughts into emotions, beliefs, and circumstances. This means that choosing your thoughts is just as important as choosing your food. You wouldn't carelessly consume anything that someone handed you without considering its impact on your physical health. Yet most people allow any random thought that drifts by to take up residence in their consciousness. They consume mental junk food all day long: worry, complaint, gossip, fear-based news, limiting beliefs, and then wonder why they feel depleted, anxious, or stuck. The transformation begins when you start approaching idea selection with the same intentionality that you bring to physical nutrition. You begin asking yourself, is this thought nourishing my consciousness, or is it toxic? Does this idea support my highest potential, Or does it reinforce limitation? Am I feeding my mind?
You see these police on the back, they doing raids. We was never planning for this day. Look, ain't no point of
The kind of content that will produce the results I actually want. This level of conscious selectivity isn't about being rigid or controlling every single thought that passes through your awareness. It's about developing what we might call mental discernment, the ability to distinguish between ideas that serve your evolution and ideas that keep you trapped in old patterns. But here's where many people misunderstand this process. They think that mental discipline means becoming some kind of thought police, aggressively fighting against every unwanted idea that appears. That approach actually creates more problems because resistance generates persistence. What you fight against tends to grow stronger. True vigilance is something entirely different. It's the alert, relaxed awareness of a skilled sentinel who can instantly distinguish between legitimate visitors and potential intruders without becoming anxious or aggressive. About the process. A good sentinel doesn't panic when someone approaches the gate. They simply observe, assess, and respond appropriately. When discordant thoughts arise in your consciousness, and they will because that's the nature of the human experience, the key is to replace them immediately with their positive counterparts, not through force or struggle, but through gentle, consistent redirection. It's like changing the channel on a television. You don't have to fight with the unwanted and program. You simply switch to something more beneficial. This practice becomes remarkably natural once you understand that you always have a choice in each moment about where to direct your attention. When worry appears, you can choose to focus on trust. When limitation presents itself, you can shift to possibility. When fear arises, you can redirect toward love. The impact of this consistent practice is profound. Over time, your mind begins to naturally gravitate toward higher quality thoughts, because you've trained it to recognize the difference between what serves you and what diminishes you. Your consciousness becomes like a well-tended garden that naturally repels weeds and encourages the growth of beautiful, life-giving plants. Most people think that transformation requires some dramatic external change, a new job, a new relationship, a new location. But the masters throughout history understood that real transformation happens through this subtle, moment-by-moment process of conscious thought selection. Change your thoughts consistently, and your entire reality reorganizes itself around those new mental patterns. This isn't just spiritual theory. This is the practical foundation that makes every other technique work effectively. Without this basic level of mental discipline, all the positive affirmations, visualizations, and manifestation practices in the world will struggle to take root because the soil of consciousness isn't properly prepared. The journey toward unlimited spiritual power requires this fundamental commitment to becoming the conscious curator of your own mental experience, treating your thoughts as the sacred creative material they truly are. Now, there's a specific method that brings all of these principles together into a practical, systematic approach that the mystics called scientific prayer, a precise technique for translating spiritual understanding into tangible results. Write in the comments, "I choose my thoughts consciously," if you're ready to become the guardian of your own mental space. What I'm about to share with you will completely revolutionize your understanding of prayer and why most people never see the results they're hoping for. For centuries, prayer has been misunderstood as fearful supplication to some distant, unpredictable deity, essentially spiritual begging, where you hope that if you plead convincingly enough, maybe divine favor will smile upon you. But true prayer, what the masters called scientific prayer, is something entirely different. It's the deliberate act by which your human mind formulates and accepts the divine pattern that you wish to see materialized in your experience. You're not begging for intervention from outside yourself. You're aligning your consciousness with the infinite intelligence that already exists within you, programming it with clear instructions about what you want to create. This is why so many people feel frustrated with traditional prayer approaches. They're operating from a foundation of separation, trying to convince a distant God to change their circumstances, rather than understanding that they're already connected to divine creative power and simply need to learn how to access and direct it consciously. Scientific prayer works because it follows the precise mechanism we've been discussing, mental law working in harmony with divine law. You're not trying to override universal principles. You're learning to cooperate with them in the most effective way possible. The process involves 4 distinct movements that flow naturally from one to the next. The first movement is what we call recollection, the practice of transitioning your attention from all the peripheral noise of daily life to the center of your consciousness, where divine intelligence resides. This isn't about forcing concentration or straining to achieve some mystical state. It's simply about gently withdrawing your awareness from external distractions and coming home to the quiet center where real wisdom and power are always available. Most people skip this crucial first step and wonder why their prayers feel scattered or ineffective. They try to pray while their minds are still racing with worry, still attached to the problem, still operating from fear-based thinking. But you can't access divine solutions while you're vibrating at the frequency of the problem. The second movement is identification, declaring universal truth in first-person present tense. This is where you move beyond hoping or asking and into knowing. Instead of saying, "Please help me feel better," you declare, "I am perfect health expressing now." Instead of "Please send me money," you affirm, "I am abundant supply manifesting in perfect ways." You're not trying to convince God of anything. You're aligning your consciousness with what's already true from the divine perspective. The third movement is visualization, clothing your verbal affirmation in sensory imagery that makes the desired outcome feel real and present. The subconscious mind thinks in pictures and feelings, not just words. So you see yourself already experiencing the answer to your prayer. You feel the emotions of having received what you're claiming. You engage all your senses to make the invisible reality tangible to your consciousness. The fourth movement is release, consciously surrendering the result to infinite intelligence while maintaining perfect trust in the outcome. This isn't giving up or becoming passive. It's recognizing that divine intelligence knows how to orchestrate circumstances in ways that your limited human perspective could never imagine. You've planted the seed through the first 3 steps. Now you allow the soil of universal mind to do what it does naturally, transform seeds into harvest. When these 4 movements flow together, you're no longer praying from limitation to abundance. You're praying from abundance to manifestation. You're not asking for what you lack. You're claiming what's already yours in divine mind and creating space for it to appear in physical experience. This approach works because it aligns perfectly with how consciousness actually creates reality. You're working with natural law rather than against it, cooperating with divine intelligence rather than trying to manipulate it. Now, there's a specific application of this process that deals with one of the most powerful creative forces available to human consciousness, the deliberate use of imagination to mold reality. According to divine design, write in the comments, I align with divine patterns if you're ready to experience prayer as creative partnership with infinite intelligence. This creative partnership with infinite intelligence brings us to one of the most fascinating aspects of consciousness, the power of creative imagination, which operates like the mind's own drafting room, where your future is literally sketched into existence before it appears in physical reality. Think of your mind as having two great wings, thought and feeling. Most people try to create change using only one wing, either pure logical thinking without emotional engagement or emotional desire without clear mental direction. But when both wings beat in unison, when thought and feeling work together in perfect harmony, your consciousness soars to that plane where ideas naturally condense into facts. This is what the ancient masters meant when they spoke about the imagination as sacred creative fire. They understood that imagination isn't just daydreaming or fantasy. It's the actual mechanism through which divine intelligence projects itself into physical manifestation. Every building, every invention, every work of art, every solution to human problems first existed as a sustained image in someone's creative imagination. But here's where most people sabotage their own manifestation process without even realizing it. They practice what we might call visualizing toward the goal, seeing themselves struggling to achieve something, working hard to overcome obstacles, hoping that someday they might reach their desired outcome. This approach actually contains the seed of distance and postponement because it reinforces the idea that what you want is separate from you, far away, difficult to attain. Scientific imagination works completely differently. Instead of visualizing toward your goal, you learn to visualize from your goal. You place your consciousness at the point of already having achieved what you desire, and from that vantage point, you look back at your current circumstances as merely a temporary stage in an already completed process. Think about how a chess master approaches the game. They don't just focus on the next move or even the next few moves. They see the entire game from the perspective of checkmate, the final victorious position. Then they work backward, determining what sequence of moves will inevitably lead to that predetermined outcome. Every decision they make is informed by the clarity of where they're going, not by the confusion of where they currently are. When you apply this principle to creative imagination, you convert any desired outcome from a distant possibility into an interior present reality that demands immediate expression through your circumstances. You're not hoping that something might happen eventually. You're operating from the knowing that it's already accomplished in consciousness and simply organizing itself into physical form. This shift in perspective changes everything about how you feel, how you act, and how you respond to current conditions. When you know that your success is already established in divine mind, you stop struggling against obstacles and start flowing with opportunities. When you're certain that your healing is already complete in consciousness, you stop identifying with symptoms and start embodying wellness. When you're clear that your abundance is already secured in infinite supply, you stop operating from scarcity and start making decisions from overflow. The transformation happens because you're no longer trying to create something new. You're simply allowing something that already exists in divine imagination to express itself through your experience. You become like an artist who can see the completed sculpture within the marble and simply removes everything that doesn't belong to that perfect vision. This is why creative imagination, when properly understood and applied, produces results that seem miraculous to those who don't understand the process. You're not violating natural law. You're working with the highest natural law, the law that governs how consciousness creates reality. The key is learning to sustain these images with emotional conviction rather than desperate hoping, to feel the reality of your desired outcome rather than the anxiety of its absence, to live from the consciousness of already being what you're becoming rather than from the limitation of what you currently appear to be. Now, there's a specific technique that amplifies the power of creative imagination exponentially, and it involves understanding how to use words as creative instruments that literally command reality into new configurations. Write in the comments, "I see from my goal," if you're ready to transform your relationship with time and manifestation. This mastery of creative imagination naturally leads us to one of the most profound revelations in all of spiritual literature. The understanding that words are not just communication tools, but actual creative instruments that literally command reality into new configurations. The Hebrew tradition has taught since the beginning that God said, "Let there be light," and light appeared. This wasn't just poetic language describing some mysterious divine process. This was revealing the fundamental mechanism through which consciousness creates form. The conscious emission of the word precedes the appearance of every form in physical reality. Think about this. Before any building exists, someone speaks about it. Before any relationship manifests, words are exchanged. Before any business succeeds, declarations are made. The word doesn't just describe what already exists. It actually calls forth what doesn't yet exist in the visible realm. Here's what most people don't realize. Every single judgment you make, every statement you declare about yourself or your circumstances becomes a sentence that mental law executes with inexorable diligence. When you say, "I am tired," "I am broke," "I am unlucky," you're not just describing temporary conditions. You're issuing commands to the creative force of the universe, instructing it to maintain and reinforce those exact experiences in your life. But when you understand this mechanism, when you grasp that your words are actually creative decrees that shape your reality, you can begin to use language with the precision and power that the masters throughout history have employed. You stop being a victim of unconscious speech patterns and become a deliberate architect of your experience through conscious word choice. The transformation begins when you learn to structure your words according to spiritual law rather than just emotional impulse. There's a specific format that amplifies the creative power of any declaration exponentially, and it follows the same pattern that divine consciousness uses to create. First, you introduce the divine name by beginning with "I am," connecting your personal declaration to the infinite creative source. This isn't just positive thinking or human willpower. You're literally plugging into the same power that spoke the universe into existence. When you say "I am," you're announcing that divine consciousness is about to express itself through your words. Second, you always conjugate in present tense, never future or conditional. Not "I will be healthy" or "I hope to be prosperous," but "I am healthy and I am prosperous." The creative force only operates in the eternal now, and future tense declarations actually postpone manifestation by maintaining the desired outcome at a distance. Third, you state positive, concrete qualities rather than negative descriptions. Instead of "I am not sick," you declare "I am perfect health." Instead of "I am not struggling," you affirm "I am abundant success." The subconscious mind doesn't process negatives effectively, and when you say "not sick," it often hears and focuses on sick. Fourth, you pronounce your declarations with serene authority, not desperate pleading or aggressive demanding, but the calm confidence of someone who knows they're stating facts about divine reality. This isn't arrogance. It's recognition of your true spiritual identity, expressing itself through your voice. Fifth, you close with gratitude, which seals the creative circuit and prevents doubt from leaking in after you've made your declaration. Gratitude implies that you've already received what you've claimed, which aligns your emotion with your words and completes the manifestation process. When these elements work together, your words become irresistible commands to the universe. You're no longer hoping that things might change. You're announcing that change is already accomplished in divine mind and organizing itself into physical expression. This isn't about magical thinking or trying to manipulate reality through clever word formulas. This is about understanding the actual creative process that governs how consciousness expresses itself in form, and learning to cooperate with that process deliberately rather than accidentally working against it through unconscious speech patterns. The impact of mastering this principle extends far beyond personal benefit. When you begin speaking from divine authority rather than human limitation, you become a source of empowerment for everyone around you, contributing to the elevation of collective consciousness. Now there's a force that amplifies the power of both creative imagination and conscious word usage beyond anything you can achieve through mental technique alone. And it's the most misunderstood yet fundamental energy in all of creation. Write in the comments, "My words create my world," if you're ready to take responsibility for the creative power of your speech. This fundamental energy that transforms both imagination and word power from mere techniques into irresistible creative forces is something that's been completely misunderstood in our modern world. When the Apostle Paul declared that all spiritual law could be summarized in one word, love, he wasn't talking about romantic emotion or sentimental feeling. He was revealing the deepest secret of how the universe actually operates. The love Paul was describing is what the Greek language called agape, unconditioned energy that flows directly from the divine principle and pours over worthy and unworthy alike with identical generosity. This isn't love that depends on someone's behavior, appearance, or usefulness to you. This is the very nature of God, projecting itself without calculation, without conditions, without asking for anything in return. Here's the hidden truth that changes everything about how you approach spiritual development. This divine love isn't just a nice sentiment or moral ideal. It's the fundamental causal force that powers all manifestation. Every technique you learn, every principle you apply, every prayer you offer only works to the degree that it's infused with this unlimited loving energy. Think about what happens energetically when someone sustains thoughts of hatred, resentment, or judgment toward another person. At the deepest level, they're declaring, "This person and I are strangers. We are separate. We are enemies." That declaration of separation causes the mind to erect invisible barriers that interrupt the natural flow of life, force, creativity, and abundance. The result is deterioration in relationships, in health, in prosperity, in peace of mind. But love operates exactly opposite to this process. Divine love melts every barrier that fear has constructed, dissolves every wall that judgment has built, and allows the current of infinite life to resume its natural course through your consciousness and circumstances. When you genuinely love someone, not because they deserve it, but because you recognize the divine nature within them, you're not just being kind to them, you're removing the energetic obstacles that were blocking your own connection to unlimited good. This is why every master teacher throughout history has emphasized love as the ultimate spiritual practice, not because it's morally superior to other approaches, but because it's the energy that makes every other approach actually work. You can practice affirmations, visualization, and positive thinking until you're exhausted, but if your heart is closed, if you're operating from separation consciousness, if you're withholding love from yourself or others, those techniques will produce limited results at best. But when your spiritual practices are infused with genuine love, love for yourself as a divine being, love for others as expressions of the same infinite consciousness, love for life itself as the perfect unfolding of divine intelligence, suddenly everything accelerates. Your words carry more power because they're spoken from unity rather than separation. Your images manifest more quickly because they're not fighting against the resistance that judgment creates. Your prayers are answered more readily because they're aligned with the fundamental nature of reality itself. This love-based approach to spiritual development produces what we might call effortless manifestation. Instead of trying to force the universe to bend to your will through mental techniques, you're cooperating with the natural tendency of divine love to express itself as health, abundance, harmony, and success in every life that opens to receive it. The transformation happens when you realize that love isn't something you have to generate or manufacture. It's the very essence of who you are. You don't have to learn how to love. You have to remember that you are love expressing itself in human form. Every person you encounter, every situation you face, every challenge you meet becomes an opportunity to choose love over fear, unity over separation, divine perspective over human limitation. This shift from practicing love as a technique to embodying love as your true nature is what separates genuine spiritual mastery from mere positive thinking. When love becomes your default response to life, when it's the energy that infuses every thought, word, and action, you become a living demonstration of unlimited spiritual power. Now, there's a specific quality of consciousness that emerges naturally from this love-based foundation, and it's what the ancients called faith, though this has nothing to do with blind belief or religious doctrine. Write in the comments, "Love is my true nature," if you're ready to let this divine energy transform everything about how you approach life. This quality of consciousness that emerges from living in divine love is what Jesus was describing when he declared that faith could move mountains. But this wasn't some mystical metaphor or religious hyperbole. He was describing the literal operation of universal laws that most people never learn to access because they confuse genuine faith with sentimental credulity. Real faith differs from wishful thinking the same way that refined gold differs from the deceptive shine of fool's gold. One is authentic, tested, and valuable. The other is surface appearance without substance. Most people think faith means believing something despite evidence to the contrary, but that's actually the opposite of true spiritual faith. Genuine faith, what we might call reasoned certainty, is born from carefully observing cause and effect in your daily experience. It emerges when you start noticing the consistent patterns that govern how consciousness creates reality, when you see the same spiritual principles working over and over again in different circumstances. This is why the masters throughout history emphasized personal experience over blind acceptance of doctrine. They understood that faith built on someone else's. Testimony is fragile and temporary, but faith built on your own direct observation becomes unshakable foundation for unlimited spiritual power. The journey toward this kind of reasoned certainty follows a natural progression that anyone can experience. It begins with knowledge, not just intellectual information, but deep understanding of the governing principles we've been discussing. When you truly grasp that you are divine consciousness expressing in human form, that your thoughts create your reality, that love is the fundamental energy of manifestation, you have the conceptual foundation necessary for genuine spiritual development. But knowledge alone isn't enough. The second phase is experimentation, taking these principles out of the realm of theory and subjecting them to practical application in real-life situations. This is where many people stumble because they want guarantees before they're willing to test the principles. But spiritual laws, like physical laws, must be experienced to be truly understood. You start with small experiments, using affirmations to find a parking space, visualizing harmony before a difficult conversation, sending love to someone who's been challenging. You observe the results with scientific objectivity, noting what works and what doesn't, learning to distinguish between genuine spiritual practice and mere positive thinking. The third phase is testimony, honestly narrating to yourself how the law responded to your experiments. This isn't about exaggerating results or convincing yourself that something worked when it didn't. It's about carefully documenting the correlation between your internal practices and external outcomes, building a personal database of evidence that these principles actually function. What's remarkable about this process is that it creates an ascending spiral where each cycle amplifies your faith and expands your capacity for manifestation. Each successful experiment gives you more confidence to attempt larger ones. Each testimony of law in action strengthens your conviction that these principles are reliable. Each expanded demonstration proves that unlimited spiritual power isn't fantasy, but accessible reality. The transformation happens gradually, but inevitably. What begins as tentative experimentation evolves into quiet confidence, then into unshakable knowing. You stop hoping that spiritual principles might work and start operating from the certainty that they always work when properly applied. This reasoned faith becomes the foundation for what the ancients called miracles, not violations of natural law, but demonstrations of higher laws that most people haven't learned to access. When you know beyond doubt that consciousness creates reality, when you've proven through repeated experience that love dissolves every obstacle, when you've witnessed the consistent power of aligned thought and word, you naturally begin to expect extraordinary results. The impact extends far beyond personal benefit. People can sense authentic spiritual authority even when they can't explain what they're detecting. Your quiet confidence in divine principles becomes a source of hope and inspiration for others who are struggling with limitation and fear. Now, there's a specific practice that emerges from this foundation of reasoned faith, and it addresses one of the most challenging aspects of spiritual development, the process of releasing old patterns and transforming past hurts into present power. Write in the comments, faith grows through experience, if you're ready to build unshakable spiritual confidence through practical application. This foundation of reasoned faith naturally leads us to address one of the most critical yet overlooked aspects of accessing unlimited spiritual power: the process of clearing away the psychological debris that blocks the natural flow of divine energy through your consciousness. Your subconscious mind can be compared to a crystalline lake that perfectly reflects the sky when its surface is calm and its waters are clear. But when heavy objects are thrown into those waters, resentments, guilt, old grievances, self-reproach, the bottom becomes turbid, releasing harmful substances that cloud the entire system and distort every reflection. Most people don't realize how much of their creative energy is tied up in maintaining old emotional wounds. They try to practice affirmations while carrying decades of accumulated resentment. They attempt visualization while their subconscious is contaminated with toxic memories. They work on manifesting abundance while their mental lake is polluted with feelings of unworthiness and anger. It's like trying to see your reflection in muddy water or expecting clear radio reception while surrounded by electromagnetic interference. The spiritual principles still work, but their effectiveness is severely compromised by the static created by unresolved emotional baggage. This is why forgiveness isn't just a nice moral ideal. It's essential psychological hygiene. Not forgiveness as weakness or pretending that harmful actions didn't matter, but forgiveness as a practical decision to stop poisoning your own consciousness with the constant replay of old hurts. The transformation begins with what we might call an exhaustive inventory, a thorough house cleaning of your emotional basement where you've been storing all the grievances, disappointments, and self-condemnations that are creating interference with your spiritual development. This requires dedicating a completely uninterrupted afternoon to honestly listing every name, date, situation, or memory that still awakens an emotional sting when you think about it. The teacher who embarrassed you in front of the class when you were 12, the business partner who betrayed your trust, the parent who never showed you the love you needed, the mistake you made that you've never truly forgiven yourself for. The key is to approach this process without judgment about whether these offenses deserve forgiveness or not. You're not trying to excuse harmful behavior or pretend that genuine wrongs didn't occur. You're simply taking inventory of where your energy is currently invested, observing the magnitude of mental and emotional resources you've been unconsciously dedicating to maintaining these old wounds. What most people discover during this process is shocking. They realize they've been carrying around enormous amounts of resentment and self-condemnation that have been operating like invisible anchors, preventing them from rising to their full spiritual potential. Every unresolved grievance is like a leak in the pipeline of divine energy flowing through your consciousness. The impact of this recognition alone begins the healing process. When you see clearly how much of your life force has been tied up in past hurts, when you understand that holding on to resentment is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to get sick, the absurdity of the pattern becomes obvious. But here's what makes this practice so powerful. You're not just clearing away negative emotions, you're literally freeing up creative energy that can then be redirected toward manifesting your highest possibilities. Every resentment released is like removing a dam that's been blocking the river of abundance from flowing freely through your experience. This process isn't about becoming a doormat or allowing people to take advantage of you. It's about refusing to give anyone the power to contaminate your consciousness with their actions. It's about reclaiming your mental and emotional sovereignty so that you can operate from divine authority rather than reactive victimhood. The journey of forgiveness, both of others and yourself, becomes the foundation for every other spiritual practice, because it clears the channel through which divine intelligence can flow unobstructed. Now, there's a specific area where this clearing process produces the most dramatic results, and it involves understanding how to transform your relationship with money and material abundance. Write in the comments, "I release what no longer serves me," if you're ready to clear away the emotional blocks that have been limiting your spiritual power. This process of clearing emotional blocks naturally leads us to one of the most misunderstood areas of spiritual development, the relationship between consciousness and material abundance. Most people have been conditioned to believe that money and spirituality are somehow incompatible, that you have to choose between being spiritual and being financially successful. But true prosperity, which comes from the Latin word prosperare, meaning to make things go forward with hope, isn't about accumulating material possessions for their own sake. It's a state of consciousness where good circulates freely without stagnation, expressing itself in forms of money, opportunities, meaningful relationships, and most importantly, abundant internal sufficiency that doesn't depend on external conditions. The transformation begins when you understand that money is simply energy in symbolic form, a representation of value exchanged, service rendered, creativity expressed. When your consciousness is clear of resentment, fear, and limitation, when you're operating from love and divine authority, abundance flows naturally because you've removed the internal blocks that were preventing circulation. Think about what happens when someone hoards money out of fear, or when they resent others' success, or when they carry guilt about having more than others. These attitudes create energetic constipation. They literally stop the flow of abundance at its source. But when someone understands that they are a channel for divine circulation, when they see themselves as a steward of universal resources rather than a hoarder of personal possessions, money flows through. They're experienced like water through a clear pipeline. This shift in consciousness requires releasing the poverty programming that most people absorbed during childhood. The idea that money is the root of evil, that rich people are selfish, that there's only so much to go around, so if I have more, someone else has to have less. All of these beliefs create internal resistance to prosperity that manifests as financial struggle, regardless of how hard someone works or how intelligent they are. One of the most powerful practices for reprogramming this consciousness involves what we might call mental tithing, a technique that trains your subconscious mind to perceive abundance even in the act of giving. Before any income touches your bank account, you mentally set aside 10% for inspirational purposes, supporting works of light, providing direct help to those in need, investing in cultural enrichment, or funding projects that elevate human consciousness. The key is to do this mentally first, seeing yourself as having so much abundance that you can joyfully share a portion before you even receive it. Then you bless the remaining 90% with gratitude, seeing it multiply and circulate to create even greater good for everyone involved. This practice works because it immediately shifts your internal experience from scarcity to overflow. Instead of operating from "I don't have enough," you're functioning from "I have so much that I can freely give." That consciousness creates a magnetic field that attracts opportunities, ideas, and resources that someone operating from lack consciousness could never access. The impact goes far beyond the actual money involved. When you consistently practice this mental abundant circulation, your entire relationship with money transforms. You stop seeing it as something scarce that you have to protect and start experiencing it as divine energy that wants to flow through you to accomplish good in the world. This approach aligns perfectly with divine law because it recognizes that you're not the source of abundance, you're a channel for abundance. The universe has infinite resources, infinite creativity, infinite capacity to supply every legitimate need. Your job isn't to create prosperity through struggle and manipulation, but to remove the internal obstacles that prevent natural abundance from expressing through your experience. When your consciousness is properly aligned with spiritual prosperity principles, when you've cleared away the emotional debris that blocks divine circulation, when you're operating from love rather than fear, money becomes a vehicle for expressing your highest purpose rather than a source of anxiety and competition. Now, there's another area where this same principle of consciousness creating form produces even more dramatic results, and it involves understanding how your thoughts and emotions directly influence your physical health and vitality. Write in the comments, "I am a channel for abundance," if you're ready to transform your relationship with money from scarcity to divine circulation. This understanding of consciousness creating abundance extends into what might be the most remarkable area of human potential, the direct influence your thoughts and emotions have on your physical health and cellular regeneration. Contemporary medicine is finally confirming what the ancient wisdom traditions have always taught. Your body is not a fixed, static structure, but rather a perpetual procession of atoms, a river of life that never repeats the same drop. The scientific reality is staggering when you really think about it. Your blood cells completely renew themselves every few weeks. The lining of your intestines replaces itself every few days. Even your bones, which seem so solid and permanent, are constantly breaking down old material and rebuilding with new substances. Within 7 years, virtually every atom in your physical body has been replaced with new atoms. If your organism is literally a work in progress, being rebuilt from moment to moment, then the logical question becomes, what's directing this reconstruction process? What's determining whether the new cells are healthy or diseased, vibrant or depleted, youthful or aged? The answer that's emerging from cutting-edge research aligns perfectly with what we've been discussing. Consciousness is the architect, and your thoughts and emotions are the blueprints. This means that every cell in your body is listening to your mental conversations, responding to your emotional states, and organizing itself according to the dominant patterns of consciousness you maintain. When you consistently think thoughts of vitality, wholeness, and divine perfection, you're literally programming your cellular regeneration process to create a healthier, more vibrant physical form. But when you identify with limitation, when you declare, "I am getting old, I am falling apart, I inherited weak genes," you're instructing the same cellular intelligence to manifest those patterns in your flesh. Your body has no choice but to obey the commands it receives from your consciousness, whether those commands serve your highest good or not. The transformation begins when you start working consciously with this cellular regeneration process through what we might call targeted spiritual intervention, instead of leaving your body's reconstruction to chance or hereditary programming. You become the deliberate designer of your own physical experience. One of the most effective approaches involves selecting a specific organ or system that needs attention and creating a precise spiritual program for its renewal. You begin with a carefully crafted affirmation that acknowledges the divine nature of your cellular intelligence. Cells of my heart are living temples of God's life, multiplying in perfect order now, or every cell in my digestive system expresses divine harmony and perfect function. The power of this approach lies in addressing your cells as conscious entities capable of receiving and responding to spiritual instruction, rather than treating your body as an unconscious machine that operates independently of your mind. You're essentially having a conscious conversation with the intelligence that's rebuilding your physical form moment by moment. Each morning, you combine this verbal instruction with a specific visualization practice. You see pure white light descending from the crown of your head directly into the organ or system you're addressing, saturating every cell with rhythmic pulses of divine energy. This isn't just imagination. You're actually directing life force energy to concentrate in areas that need healing and regeneration. What makes this practice so effective is that you're working with natural processes rather than against them. Your body wants to be healthy, your cells are designed to function perfectly, your immune system is programmed to maintain optimal wellness. By aligning your consciousness with these natural tendencies, rather than fighting against them with fear and negative expectation, you create an internal environment where healing happens naturally and efficiently. The impact of this approach extends far beyond addressing specific health challenges. When you develop the ability to consciously participate in your body's regeneration process, you realize that aging, disease, and physical limitation are not inevitable consequences of being human. They're largely the result of unconscious mental programming that can be changed through deliberate spiritual practice. Now, there's a broader application of this same principle that allows you to transform not just your body and your finances, but your entire external environment and life circumstances. Write in the comments, "My cells respond to love," if you're ready to become the conscious architect of your own physical regeneration. This mastery of cellular regeneration through consciousness reveals something even more profound about the nature of reality itself. The same law that governs how your cells respond to your thoughts also governs your workshop, your home, your neighborhood, and even your nation. Everything you see in the external world, every building, every relationship, every social condition, every economic situation, is actually a projection of collective consciousness, and that collective mind is composed of individual minds just like yours. This means that transforming your external circumstances doesn't require manipulating people, fighting against systems, or trying to force change through external pressure. It requires understanding that you can transform any situation by acting on its internal cause, the consciousness that's creating and maintaining it. Most people approach life backwards. They see conditions they don't like and immediately try to fix them from the outside. They struggle against their job situation without changing their consciousness about work. They fight with financial problems without addressing their internal relationship with abundance. They battle health issues without examining the mental and emotional patterns that may be contributing to physical symptoms. But when you understand that external conditions are always effects, never causes, everything changes. You realize that the most efficient way to transform any circumstance is to change the consciousness that's projecting it. When the internal cause shifts, the external effect must shift as well, not through struggle or manipulation, but through natural law. The key to applying this principle effectively lies in what we might call the master picture technique, a method for redesigning your external experience by first creating a perfect internal template. This involves dedicating uninterrupted time to literally painting with words the exact external conditions you want to experience, creating a detailed mental blueprint that consciousness can then use to reorganize physical reality. The process begins with taking a complete afternoon away from all distractions to focus entirely on describing your ideal circumstances in vivid, specific detail. If you're addressing your living situation, you describe the perfect home environment, the feeling of peace when you walk through the door, the quality of light streaming through windows, the sense of harmony and order in every room. If you're working on career transformation, you paint the picture of meaningful work, respectful colleagues, adequate compensation, and the satisfaction of contributing something valuable to the world. But here's what makes this practice so powerful. Your master picture must be constructed according to specific spiritual principles to be effective. First, it must completely omit any possible objections or limitations. You don't include statements like, "This would be nice, but probably isn't realistic," or "I'd love this if only I could afford it." You paint the picture as if all obstacles have already been resolved, as if divine intelligence has already orchestrated every detail perfectly. Second, your picture doesn't include the names of specific people who would need to be displaced or changed for your vision to manifest. You're not trying to manipulate individuals or force anyone to behave differently. Instead, you focus on the qualities and conditions you want to experience, trusting that divine intelligence knows how to arrange circumstances in ways that serve everyone's highest good. Third, you don't try to detail the mechanisms of how the transformation will occur. You're not planning the specific steps or worrying about logistics. You're simply creating the end result in consciousness and allowing infinite intelligence to handle the infinite details of manifestation. This approach works because you're operating at the level of cause rather than effect. Instead of trying to rearrange the chess pieces of your life through human effort alone, you're changing the game itself by shifting the consciousness that determines how all the pieces move. When you create this master picture with clarity, emotion, and complete focus on the desired end result, you're literally programming the collective mind with a new template for your experience. The same intelligence that rebuilds your cells according to your mental instructions begins reorganizing your circumstances according to your conscious design. Now there's a final dimension to this unlimited spiritual power that elevates everything we've discussed from personal transformation to planetary service, and it involves understanding your role as a conscious distributor of divine intelligence. Write in the comments, "I create from consciousness," if you're ready to become the deliberate architect of your external experience. This mastery of consciousness creation brings us to what might be the most profound revelation in all of spiritual development. Once you've learned to transform your health, your finances, and your circumstances through aligned consciousness, you discover something remarkable. Divine law never exhausts itself in personal benefit alone. The very nature of unlimited spiritual power is that it circulates, expands, and multiplies only when the good you've achieved converts into service that blesses others, and, through growing irradiation, the entire world. This isn't a moral obligation imposed from outside. It's the natural evolution of consciousness itself. When you truly understand that you are divine intelligence expressing in human form, when you've experienced the reality of unlimited creative power flowing through your awareness, you automatically begin to see your role not just as a recipient of divine blessing, but as a conscious distributor of divine intelligence to everyone around you. Think about what happens when you genuinely master these principles in your own life. You're no longer operating from desperation, fear, or limitation. You've proven to yourself that consciousness creates reality, that love dissolves every obstacle, that divine intelligence has unlimited resources to meet every need. At that point, your natural impulse is to share this understanding with others who are still struggling with the illusion of separation and scarcity. This transition from personal transformation to planetary service happens through a specific process that the masters throughout history have followed. It begins with what we might call clear service design, moving beyond vague desires to help people and formulating specific good that you want to see manifested outside your personal orbit. Maybe it's creating educational programs that teach these principles to others. Maybe it's establishing healing centers where consciousness-based wellness can be practiced. Maybe it's developing business models that demonstrate how spiritual principles can transform economic systems. The key is identifying where your unique talents and experiences intersect with genuine human needs, then creating a precise vision of how divine intelligence wants to express itself through your particular gifts and circumstances. The second phase involves mental impregnation, sustaining your service vision with the same intensity and consistency you applied to personal transformation, but now infused with altruistic love rather than personal desire. You're not trying to build an empire for your ego's glorification. You're creating channels through which divine good can reach people who desperately need hope, healing, and practical solutions to their challenges. This altruistic intensity actually amplifies your manifestation power because you're aligning with the fundamental nature of divine love, which always seeks to give, to expand, to include more and more of creation in its expression of unlimited good. The third phase translates this invisible energy into ordered action, taking the same systematic approach to serving others that you learned to apply to personal goals. You don't just hope that somehow your good intentions will magically help people. You create practical programs, establish sustainable systems, develop concrete methods for delivering real value to those you're called to serve. The fourth phase involves sustained expansion, continuously enlarging your vision to embrace more territory while maintaining the essential quality of your original inspiration. What begins as helping one person evolves into serving hundreds, then thousands, then entire communities, always guided by the same spiritual principles that transformed your individual life. What's remarkable about this progression is that the more you focus on serving others, the more your own abundance increases. Not because you're being rewarded for good behavior, but because you're functioning as a larger channel for divine circulation. The universe can trust you with greater resources because it knows those resources will be used to create greater good. This evolution from personal mastery to planetary service represents the ultimate expression of unlimited spiritual power. Consciousness that has recognized its true nature and is now dedicating itself to awakening that same recognition in every life it touches. If you've made it this far in our journey together, something profound has already shifted in your consciousness. You've spent the last hour not just learning techniques, but actually experiencing the awakening of unlimited spiritual power that's been dormant within you all along. The fact that you stayed with me through this entire exploration tells me that you're serious about transformation, that you're ready to move beyond just hoping for change and into actually creating it through conscious application of divine principles. That commitment alone sets you apart from the vast majority of people who are still waiting for their circumstances to improve from the outside. This is exactly the kind of consciousness-expanding content I share regularly on this channel. Practical spirituality that you can immediately apply to transform every area of your life. If this resonated with you, if you found real value in what we've covered together, I'd love to have you subscribe so we can continue this journey of awakening unlimited potential week after week. And if you made it all the way to the end of this deep dive into spiritual power, leave me a comment saying, I completed the journey. I read every single comment and love connecting with viewers who are truly committed to this path of conscious evolution. The like button is right there below the video, and hitting it really does help this message reach other people who are searching for these answers, who need to remember their own divine nature just like you did today. There's a video right here that takes everything we've discussed and shows you how to integrate these principles into a daily practice that will accelerate